Good evening. Can people hear me in the back? No. How about this? Good. We want everybody to hear. Welcome this evening. My name is Bobby Ray, and I'm one of the folks who helped to organize this event. We thank you all for coming out. What a wonderful group to come out on a Tuesday evening to get to know our candidates. I would like to thank the members of the Moose Family Center. They very generously have donated the use of this building for this event, and we're very grateful to be accommodated. I would also like to thank the Severn Republican Women and the Gloucester Democratic Committee for co-sponsoring this event. Their volunteers are here tonight with badges on, and they have made it happen. I would like to thank Arlen Harvey and Alfred Thornton of First United Baptist Church, who've made it possible for everyone to hear each other tonight. We really thank you. They were here today to set up and make sure everything would go smoothly. And I would also like to thank Senior Deputy J.D. Powell for coming tonight. Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Dr. Rachel Videkoffer is Assistant Director of the Wasson Center for Public Policy at Christopher Newport University, where she teaches classes on political behavior, campaigns, elections, and political analysis. In her position with the center, she conducts survey research on public policy issues and election campaigns. She's been featured in various media outlets, such as the Washington Post, Huffington Post, NPR, and is a regular contributor on CBC Radio. Just last week, her book was published, so she's an author too. The title of her book, and you'll be interested, I'm sure, is The Unprecedented 2016 Presidential Election. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. So, would you please come and introduce the candidates and share the rules? And since Dr. Videkoffer will also close the program, I would like to just take this moment to say that in gratitude for her coming across the river after teaching all day and doing this for us, we have prepared a Gloucester gift bag for you. It's got everything in it from peanuts to daffodils. Yeah, I'm going to show it to you. Okay, here it is. Don't forget it.
Truly, the honor is all mine, and I have to confess I've already been well spoiled with a barbecue dinner on my arrival, so now I really feel like I have gotten a lot of love from the 98th District. So thank you. It's a real pleasure for me to be here tonight. My passion for civics and civic engagement is what drove me to pursue that PhD and a career teaching students about the importance of democratic involvement. So to do something like this is a real pleasure. I'm not trying to just, suck up to you guys. So with no further ado, I will introduce the two candidates for the 98th District. Our first candidate, Delegate Keith Hodges, is currently serving in the House of Delegates on his second term and running for re-election. And he's being challenged by Dr. Sheila Crowley, who's running as the Democratic nominee against him. So each candidate will be, you guys have a pamphlet with the rules. I won't go over everything, But the most important things, each candidate will be granted a 2-minute opening statement. We have two lovely volunteers, 3-minute opening statement. And we have 2 lovely volunteers that will be timing that. And then we'll move right into the questions. The questions were submitted by the audience, and then we selected ones that were most pertinent to the House of Delegates, and we hope to be able to cover everybody's questions in the time that we have. And then we do ask that other than this brief introduction and at the end of the event, that we do not do applause or shouting or anything like that during the actual forum, so that we can move swiftly and definitely give more attention to the vital policy issues that you guys highlighted in your questions. So we would really appreciate that cooperation. Did you guys draw to see who goes first? Oh, I'm going to flip for that too? Oh, I get to flip twice. I'm excited. All right. So I guess we'll give the honor of calling it to the incumbent. How about that? Heads or tails, Delegate?
Let's go tails.
All right. Flipping. And it is tails. Sorry. That means the honor will go to Dr. Sheila Crowley. Meaning I didn't start first?
Yes.
Yes. You're supposed to look happy about that.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. I really appreciate the fact that this event is something that people are very much supporting. I want to say thanks to the Severn Republican Women and the Gloucester Democratic Committee for co-sponsoring this event, and obviously a thanks to the irrepressible Bobby Ray for everything she did to make this happen, and thanks to Dr. Rachel Bidekoffer for moderating, and congrats on your new book. I look forward to reading it, but it'll be after the election. I also want to thank Mr. Hodges for appearing with me tonight and for his service to the 98th District for the past 6 years. I appreciate many of your initiatives, especially around water management, and I would like the voters to know that if I am elected, I pledge to evaluate all of your work and continue to promote that which is valuable and viable for the citizens of the 98th. But I am running for the seat because I want to do a lot more. And when I ask people in the district about what worries them the most, the top issue is health care. So my top priority will be to reverse the decision made by the General Assembly to decline $2 billion a year from the federal government to provide affordable health care to 400,000 low-wage working Virginians. I think this is the moral issue of this campaign. 2 quick points about Medicaid expansion. First, Mr. Hodges worries about the cost down the road of accepting the dollars now. But in arguing Virginia to adopt expansion, former Republican Senator Walter Stosh suggested that if Virginia simply took the savings that would accrue in the early years for no longer having to cover hospital care for uninsured people in public hospitals and put those dollars in a trust earning interest, we could pay the 5% and then the 10% share that the state would have to pick up in later years. So prudent planning now would eliminate direct state outlays later. Second, Mr. Hodges talks a lot about the opiate task force he convened and recovery funding he promoted, and I applaud him for those things. But to really tackle the epidemic of opioid addiction, we have to do a lot more than talk. A necessary first step would be to adopt Medicaid expansion so that addicts could enter treatment and be on the road to recovery. I also want to restore state funding to public schools so that places like Matthews can again teach drama and French and driver's ed, for heaven's sakes. And I want to prevent the siphoning off of precious school dollars to private for-profit companies. I want to improve incomes of people who work in the service sector by gradually increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour. And I want to do a whole bunch of other things, but let me just close by saying that I thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, Delegate Hodges, we're looking forward to your statement.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank you, Dr. Bidekoffer, make sure I said that properly, for moderating this evening. Thank you to the Gloucester Democratic Committee and the Severn Republican Women, and most importantly, all of you for coming out tonight. We greatly appreciate your involvement in the political process, and we are glad that you're here. I'd also like to say thank you to my opponent for really putting her neck out on the line. and wishing to serve. It's quite a sacrifice campaigning, and you know, we are all very passionate about the Commonwealth. We may look at things differently, but we are all very passionate about that, and I commend her for that. Now, of course, I'm the Republican candidate. I believe in free enterprise, less government, lower taxes, and fiscally conservative, and using those core principles in the decisions that I make in Richmond. What I've found is that you know, being a delegate is much more than just passing laws. It takes leadership. It takes bringing people together to get things done, and I have shown proven leadership in doing that. Working on economic development here in the Middle Peninsula, have accomplished more in the last 2 years than anyone is able to do in the actual last 20 years in what we're working on. We need to give our children the ability and the opportunities to stay here when they graduate from college, or if they don't graduate from college, to have opportunities with vocational programs. And we need a qualified workforce here to do that. 72% of our workforce drives out of the district each and every day, leaving behind zero tax base. No tax base for our communities. Tax base provides funding for our schools. A tax base provides the ability for our localities to offer those services. I grew up here in the Middle Peninsula. My wife's from the Middle Peninsula. My grandparents grew up next door to them. My wife grew up next door to her grandparents. It's very important that our families have the ability to stay together. And I'm working on those things. Economic development, opioid task force, stormwater, groundwater, all of these things are important, and it takes the ability to bring folks together to make that happen. Much more about bringing the folks together, and I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I will never ask you. I want the folks that are at the table that can help on these issues. Drive 70,000 miles a year around the district and around the Commonwealth working on these issues, and I guarantee you will not find someone that's more passionate and a stronger advocate for their district than Keith Hodges is for the Middle Peninsula. You know, I own a business. I'm a small businessman. I'm vested in this community. And, you know, as a small business, and any business owners here, that business actually becomes part of you. It's a living, breathing entity. And that's exactly how I feel for the 98th District and the constituents in the 98th District. It's important to me, important to get these things done, and I am the strongest advocate you will find for the district. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. As per the rules of the debate, the person that went first with the opening statement will also take the first question, and then we will rotate who answers first, moving forward question by question. So, because of your unlucky win of the coin toss, Dr. Crowley, I hate to break it to you, here it comes, okay? All right, so this first question asks, could you please share a personal experience that has helped to shape your view of the role of government in your life?
Oh, very good question. So I have to begin by saying that I grew up in a family of people who cared a lot about public service. My father was in the military, and you can't get more public service than being in the military. My political awakening occurred during the John Kennedy campaign when I was a child, when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." That was a mantra that was very prominent in our family and is one that I've carried forward all this time. I also would just like to share that my father was a Marine. He had a very successful career. My father also had bipolar disorder, and he was at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And he was treated through a experimental program at the National Institute of Mental Health when they were first using lithium. And that program and that access to lithium completely restored my father to good health, kept our family together, and I have ever since then been extremely grateful for the role that the federal government plays in developing new treatments and providing health care. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to make sure that everybody with mental illness gets the right treatment that they need.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like me to repeat the question, Delegate Hodges?
I think I have it. Thank you very much. The role of personal experience and the role of government.
That's right.
Well, as a healthcare provider, independent pharmacist, I see each and every day folks that struggle paying for their medications, folks that struggle getting health care. And what I've seen over the years, and I've actually been practicing now for 28 years. Didn't want to say that, but it's been a long time. But what I've seen over those 28 years is these folks that I've talked to and I've worked with, the cost of medications and the cost of health care has skyrocketed and gone through the roof. And they're struggling each and every day to get access to health care and pay for that health care. And what goes along with that is government interference, and more government and more government and more government. And as you've layered more government and the cost to not only to the patients, but also to the providers, to the hospitals, to the doctors, to everyone, the costs have skyrocketed, increased, and there are so many smoke and mirrors in our health insurance industry and behind the scenes and what's going on that it's caused these people to suffer over the years. The lack of a free enterprise and a free market in our healthcare system is our problem. And I've seen how these folks have dealt with this over the years. And as the free market has disappeared from healthcare, these folks have actually suffered, and have suffered at a tremendous cost over the years.
Okay, well, you guys are being so good. The timers feel useless over there. You can fan yourselves, right? Okay, so this time we'll go first with Delegate Hodges for this question. Please give an example of times where you've been able to cross party lines to affect change.
Sure, and I'll be glad to. It was actually my freshman year in the House of Delegates 2012 session. And many of you remember the ultrasound bill that was in that session. Here I am, I'm pro-life. I will tell each and every one of you I am pro-life. But at the end of the day, that was House Bill 462, I believe. In that 2012 year, I voted against it. I was the only freshman and one of only a couple of Republicans that voted against it. That was a big step, a huge step. And I crossed not necessarily party lines, but it was in my gut. I knew it was not in the best interest of our society to pass that bill. And that's I've lived with that, and I still to this day believe that was the best decision.
Okay, very good. Dr. Crowley?
Well, I think as most folks know, I spent 18 years working in Washington on federal housing policy, and I worked most of that time at a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. And we had to work with people on both sides of the aisle in order to accomplish anything. And the thing that I'm most proud of is that we were able to ultimately pass legislation with considerable negotiations between Republicans and Democrats in both the House on the Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee to establish the National Housing Trust Fund. It wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been bipartisan support, and we worked really hard to make that happen. I personally worked very hard to make that happen, and we called upon people in states with senators and representatives who are Republicans to help educate them. And finally the bill was passed and it was signed into law by President George W. Bush. And that law now is providing millions of dollars a year to every state to build and operate housing for the lowest income people, including people with disabilities and people with mental illness. And I don't make causal statements very easily about, what Sheila did or Sheila doesn't do. But I am very certain that it was the effort of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition and all of our partners working diligently, going from one meeting to another, negotiating the small details of how that bill would work to actually get it passed and have people be very proud of it. Anyway, I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud of the effect that it's having today in every single state, including in Virginia.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next topic, we will start with Dr. Crowley, is dealing with the issue of political gerrymandering. The questioner wants you to define for the audience what political gerrymandering is, and then ask to explain what its effects are on our democracy and how it could be fixed.
Sure. Well, political gerrymandering happens when elected officials do what is their duty to redraw the lines for the House of Delegates as well as our congressional delegation after each census. So the census tells us who's living where, how many people are living where, and how to draw districts that are roughly equal. What's happened with the districts in Virginia over this last time is that districts were drawn so that more Republicans were drawn into districts in order to favor Republican incumbents. That also led to more favoring Democratic incumbents. But what we have now is 66 seats in the House of Delegates that are held by Republicans, 34 by Democrats. And the analysis is, first of all, that Virginia is one of the most gerrymandered states in the Union, and second, that if we were simply drawing seats based on population and the other things that are to go into drawing districts, then we would have no more than 55 Republicans serving in the House of Delegates. So what happens is that it creates enormous partisanship, and people don't have any reason to work across the aisle when they're in such safe seats. The answer is to move to nonpartisan redistricting, and many states have moved to that, and there is legislation that has been introduced in the General Assembly to do that. One of the top priorities that I would have going to the General Assembly is to work to make sure that before the next census, we have a commitment to nonpartisan redistricting in Virginia.
Thank you very much. Delegate Hodges, I will remind you to define gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, and then discuss how to fix it. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Of course, gerrymandering would be dividing up where one political party could possibly have preference over another political party. Whether or not that's occurring in Virginia, I think is still yet to be decided. And
I'll remind the audience that we really need to practice decorum.
Virginia is not symmetrical. You know, it's fairly triangular. You know, we're not dispersed equally in our population with regard to political party. 1 in 8 Virginians lives in Fairfax County. So divide equally, and you know, and so it's 50-50 ratio, I guess, is what folks want. With equal as far as political parties, very, very difficult. And these commissions that have been formed in other states actually have really not shown where gerrymandering still does not occur. In Virginia, when they were last when they last drew the lines, a bipartisan majority actually voted for the current districts. And I think it's still yet to be decided whether or not there's some court cases in Virginia that's moving forward. And right now, I think our political process that we have in drawing these lines is fair and equitable.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And now Delegate Hodges will go first with this next question, which asks, what can you do as a delegate, if you were to be in the House of Delegates for Dr. Crowley's case, to reduce the cost of health care for Virginians in the Commonwealth?
Sure, and this is something I actually take the lead on, and working on things in the General Assembly and actually across the nation where no one is actually working on it. Being an independent pharmacist and a healthcare provider and also a legislator, I'm in a unique position to look at certain things and look at things differently. I've discovered what they call spread pricing in the pharmaceutical industry, where actually pharmacies are paid one price, and then on the back end, by the time it's billed to the Commonwealth or to Medicaid or to a plan sponsor, oftentimes it can be up to a $900 difference. Of what I've discovered. I have instances where a patient pays a $30 copay, the pharmacy's paid $0, but it's $488 on the back end. I've already worked on this in the state employee benefit, which I first discovered it, estimate $50 million there. In the last session, I actually introduced budget language that looks at these contracts, when these contracts are amended, that brings transparency to healthcare and in this process. And I have to estimate that can be hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm now moving forward on the commercial side with this. And I will tell you that I have some folks that aren't going to like me very much within the insurance industry, but this needs to be done. There needs to be transparency in healthcare. And this is 35% of the market in Virginia, which is those folks that are purchasing their own healthcare that I'm really working on. And I estimate that can be hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that's going into increased premiums, increased cost of healthcare. And there needs to be transparency in healthcare, because what the problem is right now, you have no control at that point of sale. That's the problem. And we need to return to that. So actually, I'm already working on this. I have some innovative ideas and have some meetings just in the last week to move forward. And we will get this done.
Thank you very much. Dr. Crowley, I am going to actually take a point of privilege and let you know we'll be touching on Medicaid expansion separately as a topic. Since Delegate Hodges so helped me out by not talking about it, if we could focus on other ways, like specifically about lowering healthcare costs in the Commonwealth, and then we will talk about Medicaid.
Sure, thank you. Well, let me just commend Delegate Hodges for his work on figuring out how to reduce the cost of medications under the Medicaid program. Everywhere in America and everywhere in the state of Virginia, healthcare costs are accelerating at exceptional rates. We all know that. We all know, and we all know why. And that's because our healthcare system is predicated on a for-profit model. It is predicated on hospitals, drug manufacturers, and insurance companies generating a profit that is then taken out of the pockets of ordinary people who have to pay for all of this. I have just finished reading an astounding book, which I would commend to all of you, about all of the mechanisms by which healthcare costs are increased that in a way that would never be allowed if you're buying an automobile or if you're buying a house, where all sorts of regulations govern that. We have nothing that really governs the way it is that healthcare is priced now and what it is that people pay. And insurance companies will pay almost anything. Medicare, fortunately, keeps some of the prices down. And so if we move to something that was more like Medicare for other people, for everybody, we would be able to start to bring down the cost. But I think it's important for everybody to understand that the health insurance, healthcare industry, and now surpasses the defense and finance and everybody else in terms of the level of contributions they make to lobbying, including to my opponent. And that we got to get the big money out of lobbying for healthcare, and we have to start looking at healthcare that is designed to deliver good services to ordinary people as opposed to super duper paychecks to CEOs.
Okay, and to expand on the topic of healthcare, our Medicaid expansion question asks, so what is your position on the Medicaid expansion, and please defend that position.
Sure. Well, as I said in my opening statement, I think that it is it is the most important issue of this campaign, and one of the most important issues facing the General Assembly going forward. And right now in Virginia, there are 400,000 low-wage working Virginians who would be able to have access to health insurance if the General Assembly would agree to accept Medicaid expansion, and which involves accepting $2 billion a year in federal funds. That would create an enormous amount of commerce in every single community, because you have expansion of healthcare jobs, you have shoring up of rural hospitals. All the evidence from the states that have done this show that it does have an enormous economic benefit, much less providing many better health outcomes for the people who are now insured. So why hasn't Virginia done that? And I've listened carefully to Mr. Hodges' explanations for that, and one is that it has to do with the increasing cost of Medicaid. Well, you know, as we just said, everything is increasing. You can't just say, well, we're not going to expand Medicaid because we have a problem in every other program. We have to solve that problem. He also talks about being fearful that the federal government will eventually step out and Virginia would be stuck with the outcome. Well, that's okay if they did, which they won't do, but if they did, then Virginia could drop the program. But the other thing is talking about the growing cost in the states, and that states are getting out of it. And the evidence is that no states are getting out of it. States are adapting their programs as they should be, as they're gaining experience with it, but no state is interested in exiting the Medicaid expansion program, and we need to expand that in Virginia now.
Okay, thank you very much. Delegate Hodges.
Thank you. I strongly believe that we made the correct choice in not expanding Medicaid in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And when you look at the states that did expand, huge cost overruns. You're looking at Kentucky, $3.3 billion in cost overruns. Oregon, $1.2 billion. Even their governor came out, as a Democratic governor, said, look, this is causing our problems. And it's leading to huge holes in their budgets. Now, the reason for that is the money that the federal government says will be there is not enough to cover the actual cost of Medicaid. The numbers to run the program, to expand Medicaid, are higher than what they anticipated, and the money's not enough to cover it. Now, simple math, folks, and I'm a numbers cruncher, love to do it. The math, it is not there to be able to run the program. And expanding into a broken system actually makes it worse. Actually makes it worse. The examples that I gave you that are, $250, $300 million possibly in the Medicaid system, you expand into a broken system, that just expands those numbers and inflates those numbers and drives our state into the hole. We can't do that. So what happens if you do expand Medicaid? Then there's less money for education. You want to fund education. You want to fund law enforcement. There will be less money for law enforcement. Now, if you do anything, you need to move forward the right way. You need to fix the problem with our healthcare system. That is the root of the problem. We need to fix our entire healthcare system. Unfortunately, they're having the discussion in Washington. Don't have any intention of going to Washington, but to me, it's actually very easy to fix, which is another conversation.
Well, thank you very much. And I do want to mention that we had 13 questions on Medicaid expansion from the audience, and I feel like I should mention that you've received so much of the audience attention. Okay, our next question will start with you, Delegate Hodges. What specific actions as a delegate can you take to address the opioid crisis and other substance abuse issues in the Commonwealth?
Sure, and in specific actions, and I live and breathe it each and every day, and have watched this crisis and see how it's actually grown. Of course, legislation, which we've carried and have worked with other legislators. I'm on the governor's task force for prescription drugs and heroin abuse. I'm also on the Substance Abuse Service Council. And then also here in the district, I launched an opioid task force where we have folks from all over the district. We have law enforcement, Commonwealth's attorneys, sheriffs, CSBs, social workers, churches, you name it, we try to bring them to the table. Because to solve this issue, it needs to be a community effort. The General Assembly can't solve it by itself. It needs to be a community effort. And what works here in the 98th District and what works in Richmond or in Northern Virginia can be totally different. We need to get together, and again, it's about leadership and bringing folks together to make this work. We have divided into 5 subcommittees that are doing excellent work. One of the initiatives that we're extremely proud of that came out of one of our subcommittees was a Recovery Sunday initiative, to have churches from across the Commonwealth of Virginia preach on this from the pulpit. Very powerful. And in doing this, it draws awareness to it. We need to, and especially into the problem, but in the rural communities, we need to engage our faith-based communities to get them involved. That's one thing we have not done a very good job at. We created a website that had the tools for a church to be able to provide these, to do this. We also have 4 other subcommittees. We're looking at alternatives to drug courts. We're looking at funding for treatment facilities. We're looking at a number of different initiatives right here at home. And I've taken the lead on this and done some very creative things, not only as a legislator, but in making the laws, but here in the district where no one else has taken the lead doing that in the Commonwealth.
Thank you very much. Dr. Crowley.
So I listened carefully to the question and to Mr. Hodges' answer, and I think the question was, what legislation would you undertake? And I didn't hear any legislative efforts from Mr. Hodges. I may have missed it, but I didn't hear any. So let me just say that as I said in my opening statement, the first thing we can do if we want to really seriously address the opioid crisis is to get people insurance and get them into treatment. It's not complicated. And the notion that you can talk about this and have people have meetings and somehow or another that's going to resolve the fact that people are addiction, I think shows a really fundamental lack of understanding about the nature of addiction and the power of addiction and what it takes for people to overcome addiction. And so what we need is access to treatment in as many different forms as possible, but anybody who has worked with somebody who is seriously addicted will tell you that it doesn't happen with talk therapy once a week. It doesn't happen with sitting down with your preacher. It happens because you move into an intensive, inpatient kind of program, and that costs money. And, you know, we have, there's been an enormous amount of money spent across the country in fueling the opioid crisis, a large amount of it through Medicaid, because of the availability of pills through these pill mills across the country, especially in Appalachia, where Medicaid paid for them. We need to now stop doing that, stop subsidizing the drug industry through our programs, and start subsidizing treatment so that people can, in fact, get on the road to recovery.
Thank you very much. The next question is going to be dealing with the Second Amendment. What is your position on the Second Amendment and the right of citizens to defend their lives, families, and homes with firearms?
I think that people have the right to defend their lives, families, and their homes with firearms. I don't think that people need an arsenal of assault weapons and extensive magazines and all the other things that are available now. I see that doesn't defend anything. That's for people who are going to war. My position on guns is that we need common sense gun laws. I would certainly support restoring the first handgun a month law in Virginia, which we had for some time and which helped reduce the number of guns in Virginia that were traveling up and down the East Coast. There's no reason why anybody has to buy more than one gun a month. I don't understand why that's so complicated. I also would like for us to try to pass legislation to make sure that the safety systems that are put on guns that keep them from being fired by anybody other than the owner would become law in Virginia. And if we did that, we would no longer have these headlines about a 4-year-old taking a gun out of the purse of their grandmother and shooting a 2-year-old and having child deaths. I mean, we have an enormous number of child injury and child deaths because of handguns and other guns that are left lying around by families who are not responsible. We need to make sure that those guns can't go off anymore. I think there's many things we can do. We need background checks. We need to have no-fly lists. We need to do all of those kinds of things that will reduce the level of gun violence in our country, which is epidemic and which is unlike any other civilized country in the world. And I think it's a sad commentary on America that we continue to have these mass shootings and we don't do anything about it, and that the NRA is really acting like they are part of our legislative system, part of our governance. They didn't get elected to anything. They have to stop buying votes.
Okay, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you very much. First, I will tell you I am a strong defender of the Second Amendment. I actually received the NRA endorsement even though I didn't ask for it. I've never asked for an endorsement, and I have a number of endorsements, but I'll be fair to tell you I've received that endorsement. I'm a firm believer in the Castle Doctrine and the ability to protect yourself and in your home. And when you lay this gun down on the table, that gun doesn't shoot a person. It's the person that shoots the person. We have strict gun control laws in Chicago, and look what happens there. We have some of the strictest gun controls in the world in France. Look what happened there. The largest mass shooting that ever occurred. the guns will get into the folks' hands and the criminals. They will. They have a way of doing that. What we need to do, and of course we do need common sense gun laws. We also have to look at, the ability so they don't get in the wrong hands. We have some of the questions regarding mental health. Those are questions we need to continue to debate and we need to continue to talk about. But gun control is not the answer. And you can look around the country and you can look around the world and show that it doesn't not fix this problem.
Okay, we will begin with Delegate Hodges on this next topic. It says, having looked closely at the funding for school districts in the 98, it appears that almost all have lost some funding since 2009. How can you, as our delegate, ensure that this funding is restored?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Well, number one, when you look at just past session, when the governors introduced budget, came to the General Assembly, we look at the governor's budget, and it was the House Republican caucus that took the lead and increased $8 million into K-12 education. So those that say we're not for K-12, we increased it over the governor's budget. Actually, funding, and I have the numbers right here straight out of the Virginia budget, were Matthews. Actually, funding per pupil increased 21.7%. When you look at Gloucester County schools, also an increase. But then you look over here, here's a problem, folks. Matthews County lost 210 students. When you're funding on a per pupil basis, that's your problem. Middlesex County, 110 students. Gloucester County, over 600 students. That's the problem for the reduced funding. That's why I'm so focused on economic development. Economic development here in the district to create a tax base will give the ability for our localities to increase funding to our schools. Teachers' salaries are not set by the General Assembly. A lot of folks think that salaries are set by the General Assembly. They are set by the localities. If the localities don't have the businesses, if the localities don't have the tax base, how can they pay their teachers? That's the problem that we need to fix. The bleeding and the loss of population here in the Middle Peninsula, where folks are leaving. We're actually losing population, folks. That's the problem that we have to fix. And the economic development initiatives that I've taken, bringing localities together and working on economic development initiatives, and a number of them to change this problem, will change the outflow of folks from the Middle Peninsula and ultimately result in increased business and increased funding to our school systems.
Dr. Crowley.
So here we are with dueling data, one of the dilemmas of political debate. I have in front of me data that shows that the direct student aid per student by the state in Gloucester County has fallen by 14.4% since 2009, adjusting for inflation and for the change in enrollment. So I'm not sure where the data are that the delegate is referring to. These are data compiled by every single jurisdiction by the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis. It also shows that there are 14 fewer staff members in the Gloucester County Public Schools now than there were in 2009 relative to their enrollment. And that accounts for the fact that there is a decrease in enrollment. Obviously, when there's a decrease in enrollment, your funding goes down, but that's not why it is that we are experiencing this huge gap. In 2009, funding was cut from the school budgets for the state. That is now across the state by 10.7%, felt especially hard in Gloucester, and that funding has not been restored. And unfortunately, Governor McCullough didn't put it in his budget for this year, as I was hoping that he would be. That money has not been restored. That money took primarily people who are classroom aides and those kinds of folks out of the classrooms. Now, if you look at what it is that the General Assembly did last year or this year around state funding for schools, and you sort of have to really be a budget nut because there's a huge number of different accounts to try to get through that. But my analysis is that in sum total, there may have been increases here, but there were many things taken away, so that there's certainly not a net growth in school funding.
And education was pretty much tied with Medicaid expansion, just so you guys know. Those are definitely issues that constituents are very concerned about. Okay, moving into our next question and starting with Dr. Crowley. Can you please tell us how you are funding your campaign?
Sure. So I've never run for office before. I've raised money my whole life for causes, not for myself. So I sort of know how to raise money, but this was a new experience, raising money for myself. And I just sort of, fell into it like, okay, I got to figure this out. So it started with the people who encouraged me to run, who wrote checks after I said yes. And then I got on the phone and I called all my brothers and sisters and my cousins and my mother and my aunt. And even my Republican relatives gave me money, okay? So that was the next step. And then I sent an email to all the people that I worked with across the country and said, guess what? I flunked retirement. I know I said I was going off to live in this bucolic rural area and have a nice teaching gig, but I'm running for office because I have to step up. And so I had lots of friends across the country who started making contributions. And then what happened is this floodgates of contributions opened up from citizens across the district. People who just believed in the campaign and who sent me money in small amounts and large amounts. There were 3 fundraisers here in the district for me. There were 3 people that I knew in Richmond. There were 2 in DC. So that we had successful fundraisers. And so lots and lots, so 90% of my donations come from ordinary, everyday individuals. Yesterday, I got a $2 donation, an $8 donation, a $20 donation, and a $100 donation, none of which I asked for. They just came in from people who wanted to support this campaign. So that's the basis for my campaign. It's money from ordinary people. It's money from individuals. I have no money from corporations. I have money from unions, which I'm very proud of, and I have money, which I'm really, really proud of this. My single largest donor, except for Win Virginia, which is supporting Democrats, is Lowell Matthews Democratic Committee, which is giving me $4,000.
Thank you very much. Delegate Hodges.
Thank you. And actually, my funding is a mishmash of funding. And I will tell you, it comes from everywhere. It comes from corporations, it comes from PACs, and it comes from individuals. And which is expected, actually, when you're an incumbent and in office. But I will tell you, the reason folks give to my campaign is because I'm effective and they believe in me. It doesn't matter if you give to me or not. I will vote the right way. I've done that in the past. I told you earlier, I took a strong vote on an ultrasound bill. I'm going after the insurance industry, although folks say, hey, you're getting money from the healthcare industry. I'm taking them on, folks, in this session. They've given to me in the past. And you know what? This is about the people and it's about the constituents. Getting a $500 check from a particular political group means nothing to me in the end, because I am such a strong advocate for the people in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the people in the district, and I'm very passionate about what I did. And at the end of the day, folks that know me, it's about what's right and about what is wrong.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move in to our next question here. How will you balance the need, and of course we'll start with you, Delegate Hodges, I should have said. How will you balance the need for economic development in the Middle Peninsula with the imperative to also protect the Chesapeake Bay?
Sure, and well, thank you very much, and I wish we had a couple of hours to talk about that, because, again, it's about finding solutions and looking at things in a different way. And when you ask that question, it's a very complex issue, complicated issue, and it's about solving a very complex problem. And in looking at this, and it's anything that I've ever done with regard to living shorelines, with the aquifer, with stormwater development, and the balance between economic development and environmental protection has always been to have at least as good a protection, if not better. Now, there are 23 layers of government, laws and regulations that actually protect water quality and water resource management. But at the end of the day, what they've done is they've tied our hands to be able to move forward with economic development. So what they're saying is, look guys, you're a big green space, but we're not doing anything for you. But we focused on the Southwest Virginia, the coal region, and the tobacco region. But what's happening here? No. I created the Rural Coastal Virginia Economic Enhancement Authority that brings together the Northern Neck, the Middle Peninsula, and the Eastern Shore. Our challenges and our economies function very much the same way, but also, you know, our challenges are very much the same. This brings all of those localities to work together on economic development in a different way, but also to be able to provide the environmental protection that we need to protect the Chesapeake Bay, which is our greatest asset. But as soon as you put a shovel in the ground, there are 20 permits and 1,000 miles of red tape. This is a new, a novel approach in economic development that also can protect our most valuable resource, to protect the Chesapeake Bay.
Thank you very much. Dr. Crowley?
Well, it's presented as if it's a dichotomy. And I actually don't think it's a dichotomy, because I don't think there's anybody who lives and works here who doesn't want the Bay to thrive and continue to improve. I mean, maybe there's some, you know, really cynical people, but most people that I've met, whether they're watermen or they're farmers, they care deeply about the quality of the water here and the quality of the Bay. And so it is coming up with a way for us to develop new technologies for farming and new technology and introduce new kinds of ways of doing that, and for making sure that the way it is that the production or the fishing of crabs, oysters, etc., is done in a way that helps make sure that people earn a living. And I think that most watermen feel strongly that they don't want the Bay to be depleted again of the things that they earn their living from. So I think it is it's a common sense approach to bringing people together. The Chesapeake Bay still is in danger. We had a big, what was it, an algae spread this summer that was a problem. I mean, it's still in danger. It's come a very long way, but we certainly can't lose ground on that, and so we have to work on both of those. And if there's regulations that are nonsensical, then we should work through those, and those things should be changed. Usually every regulation is really a protection of something important, and so we need to be very careful about that.
Thank you very much. This is our final question. I'm going to take the liberty of just building on it a tad bit. So one of you will be serving the 98th District in January, and let's pretend you're preparing for session. What would be your number one actionable legislative priority for the upcoming General Assembly session?
Well, I think I've stated mine. My first one would be to work on getting the Medicaid expansion done, and to working with all the people who are now in the General Assembly and whoever it is that is our governor, to make that happen. And that can, hopefully there will be enough people who have thought this through and are willing to work on that. But I will work as hard as I can across the aisle to try to convince people that this is the right thing to do for Virginians at this point in time. So that's my number one. My number two, can I go to number two since I still have time?
You can.
Okay, so my number two will be to support the legislation that has been introduced numerous times to raise the minimum wage. Virginia is way behind other states in terms of our looking at the wage rates for people in the low wage workforce. We're still at $7.25. Major companies are recognizing that you can't get and retain employees if you don't do better wages. Target is moving their wages up to $15 an hour. Virginia needs to get, out of this rut and into creating wages that people can live on. So I would support those bills as soon as I'm there. I would seek out their sponsors and promise to work on those things. And then the third thing that I would be very, very committed to is figuring out, digging deep into understanding the complex maze of funding for public schools and work to restore the money that was lost in 2009, which is now causing jurisdictions to have to increase their funding for schools at a time when, I might add, state income taxes are going up while property taxes are going down for jurisdictions. The state needs to step up and do a lot more on that, and that would be a top priority.
Okay, thank you very much. And Delegate Hodge, I will also say happily some new questions arrived, so you can answer it as ever you see fit, with one or three.
Sure. Thank you very much. Of course, I'm very passionate about economic development. 72% of our workforce drives out of the district each and every day, leaving behind a workforce where we have the lowest average wages in the state and in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I am very passionate about that. And I am looking now and it's actually a complex issue with economic development. Economic development, it involves workforce development, and it involves education. It involves stormwater and the effect of stormwater runoff, and how that ties up the ability for economic development, and of groundwater issues as well. And we're actually now looking at over 70 different ways to look at this issue and have what I call a rural coastal Virginia economic development package, because we are outnumbered in Richmond. And the Rural Coastal Virginia Economic Enhancement Authority that I created in statute brings together the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula, and Eastern Shore to give us that unified voice we need to get things done. And moving forward with ways to utilize that Economic Enhancement Authority and having that unified voice will make a difference. The coal region was successful because they got together. The tobacco region, together. This unified voice will be a game changer for the Middle Peninsula and the Rural Coastal region. So it's a complex issue. I think we're going to roll all of those into possibly having a legislative package for Rural Coastal. The next initiative, of course, is transparency within healthcare. Transparency and returning the ability back to each and every one of you to have control of your healthcare is necessary to bring those costs down. I can prove that, I can show it, and I will be moving forward with some initiatives for transparency in healthcare.
Our next questioner wants to know how, the 98th can engage in economic development but still maintain the rural character that, make it distinct. So if you could speak to that.
Sure. Well, I grew up here. I was running a boat long before I was driving. That Franklin Safe print that you see on the wall, I lived it. Hunting, fishing, trapping, you name it. Very important to me, and I'm very passionate about protecting that. And what we have found is, of course, as you have, burdensome regulations, economic development decreases. And as economic development increases, there's an offset. But what we found is there can be a balance. And we've actually looked at models where, this model is in New York, which is in the Catskills region, where New York City built these huge, massive reservoirs for New York. And of course, they had to protect that drinking water in the Catskills region. Guess what? No economic development, no jobs, no development, no farming because of sediment. They couldn't do it. And economic development was non-existent. And they finally got together. There was a lot of infighting. And they were such a thorn in New York City's side that, they created what they call the Catskills Watershed Corporation. And if you look at the Catskills region, it's absolutely gorgeous. But they have economic development, and 15 different programs are actually managed through that Catskills Watershed Corporation. Everything from economic development to stormwater to tourism. So it protects the quality of life they know and love, but at the same time it is a thriving region. That's exactly what I'm doing with the Rural Coastal Virginia Economic Enhancement Authority, and that actually was the Catskills region was the thought process behind creating this. And we can move forward with economic development, still protect the bay, but have economic development in a different way and good paying jobs right here in the Middle Peninsula.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Crowley?
Well, I moved here because this is the most beautiful spot on earth. And many of us who were born and raised other places came here because of the environment and the culture and the approach to living that is offered by being so close to the water. And so it is very important to me to protect that quality of life that we have here, as well as to improve the economic well-being of people who are here. My view is that the most important and most effective economic development plan we could undertake in the 98th district is to make every single school a world-class school so that people would want to move here and put their children in our schools. People don't move places where they find that the schools are not up to snuff. People want to move to places where they are attracted to the best possible schools. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how to get our schools to be the best schools in Virginia. And I'm very competitive. Let's make them the best schools in Virginia. And for God's sakes, let's have driver's ed back at Matthews High School as a start. So we need to do that. I think that is really crucial to any kind of economic development. But the second thing is that, the world of big factories isn't coming back. Amazon is not going to move their plant to the 98th district. But many, many people earn their living by telecommuting. And in the absence of a real solution to the broadband access here, we're not going to be able to offer that. And so that should be a top priority. And my view of the broadband problem is that if there were money to be made, taking broadband, taking those lines down to the end of every single road, somebody would have done it by now. There's no money to be made in that. It should be a public utility, and we need to create the mechanism for doing that so that people can, in fact, work in their homes and bring money into the district.
Okay, this is a tough next question, so take a deep breath and maybe a sip of water. All right, so if it should come to pass that we had to cut the Virginia budget, what part of the budget would you target and why? And I will add for the person that wrote the question that you absolutely must choose something.
I go first?
Oh, yes, you do.
Okay, well, people think that all the budgets are all about spending, the things that are on the expense side of the budget. But the state budget and the federal budget have something called tax expenditures in them. And those are tax breaks that go to support a variety of interests that people with high-priced lobbyists are able to buy tax breaks and get them done. And so the first place I would go is the tax expenditure budget and see who it is that's not paying their fair share of taxes and figure out how to change that so that in fact more revenue came into the state so that we wouldn't have to cut essential state services like schools and police and public health and all of the things that we rely on government to do.
Okay, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you very much. Actually, that's a tough question. It's a very complicated question, but I will tell you, when I go into session, each and every year, I look for ways to find a savings in the budget, and I've actually been very successful. Saved $10 million in the Virginia Medicaid program with pre-need funerals, and showing that Medicaid was leaving money on the table, appropriated. All they needed to do was hire one person. Couldn't get them to listen. We've looked at septic systems. I've talked to you about my Medicaid initiative in the last few questions ago. But in looking at it, one thing I would do is I'm looking at and working very much on stormwater. And actually, I could cut Virginia's stormwater program by a tremendous amount in the plan that's actually moving forward with the committee that I've actually put together. Again, it's about bringing people together and finding solutions. So actually, I have a way that moving forward that will have better environmental protection with our stormwater, will cut DEQ's budget, but also send more money to the Water Quality Improvement Fund to actually have a better outcome for the Chesapeake Bay. So just saying you're going to cut one program, it gets very complex, but there are a lot of moving parts. When you cut one program or do anything, there are a lot of moving parts in order to make this work. The model that I'm proposing actually is realistic, and it has a great chance of moving forward, saving the Commonwealth of Virginia money and providing more environmental protection with Chesapeake Bay.
Okay, thank you very much. This is definitely a local question because I'm not really sure what it's touching on. So it says, why are our navigational markers being pulled and what can you do about it?
Is that for me? First this time?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. And that's actually an issue. It's a local issue, but it's also an issue that's been going on in the Commonwealth for quite some time. What has happened is the dredging in a lot of our smaller creeks, there were earmarks by the federal government to dredge these creeks. Well, the money is gone. The money is no more, and we're not going to get any of that federal money. And so now, with those creeks filling in, the Coast Guard, because you can't navigate and the channels are filling in, they're going in and taking these navigational markers. These waterways, they're our life, and they're our bread and butter here. We need to find a way to keep them open for marinas, for watermen, for recreational boaters. It's very important for the economy here in the Middle Peninsula. Now, this has been a federal issue, but as a state legislator, again, it goes back to solving problems and bringing people together to make it work. I know Congressman Whitman has a meeting next Friday. I will be there. I've also been involved in a number of meetings with the Corps, the Congressman's office. We held one at DIMS just last month. And as a state legislator, I'm looking at ways to bring all of these folks together to, number one, elevate the status of these creeks so that the Corps can then look at them. There's still certain small pots of money that may be available, but you need to elevate these creeks to a certain level where the Corps says, hey, this is a viable project and I can dredge this. But then you also have to look at what's out there between the state and the localities, and now we're actually up to 18 different ways of looking at solving this problem. And you can't say taxes, that's non-existent. You have to reallocate the resources that you have in order to make this work. So I'm already on this and moving forward with it. I can't really let out the actual ideas because you know how it is. If you put those ideas out there, it may blow up, but we are moving forward with solving this problem, and we'll have solutions in the upcoming session.
Thank you. Dr. Crowley?
Well, so much for transparency. Here's my view of, as I understand what's happened, and this is something I'm totally new to, but I've talked to several people, and I had a lengthy conversation with the fellow who owns the marina at Davis Creek, and all I can say is that man has gotten a runaround from the Corps of Engineers, from the Coast Guard, from the Board of Supervisors, from Mr. Hodges, and from Mr. Whitman. Everybody passes the buck on this question, and at least according to this gentleman. So as I understand it, and Mr. Hodges is right, this used to be a federal responsibility. And so the Corps of Engineers had responsibility for dredging small creeks. That was their job. It's not just in Virginia, it's across the country. Dredging small creeks, that's part of what they were supposed to do. And those funds are no longer there. That's a result of budget cuts at the federal level. So be careful what you ask for when you want the belt tightening at the federal level, because ultimately that's going to hit to something that you really, really care about. Now, Mr. Whitman could very easily ask for an earmark in any number of budgets to figure out how to dredge Davis Creek at this point, or he could have at one point. But the Republicans have taken away earmarks as an ability for people to get things done for members of Congress. So that, if in fact earmarks are restored in a future Congress, we could in fact count on that kind of money coming in. But otherwise, it's going to have to come from someplace. And the question is, are the people, the individual landowners, are they responsible? Well, it's not their water. The water belongs to the government. So it's going to have to be the responsibility of the local government or the state government and the federal government, or all three, coming together to create a program that's going to keep these creeks viable. Otherwise, economic development is going to come to a halt here.
Well, I do thank you both, so that now as a new resident to the peninsula, I'm starting my third year, I will now know all about that issue, and I will never have to stumble into it blindly again, so thank you. Our final question is also going to be a challenge, I think. So this question asks, and Dr. Crowley, you will field it first, should marijuana be legalized?
Marijuana should be decriminalized and it should be made available for medical purposes. We don't need to be putting people in jail. We don't need to be prosecuting people for marijuana. We should be long past that. It unfairly targets people of black people, black men. We need to stop sending people to jail for that, and we need to move to a better management of our sense of what the use of marijuana should be. Medical marijuana is a proven substance for treating pain and nausea associated with cancer and many other things. We need to stop playing around with that and help people get the medication they need.
Thank you very much, and Delegate Hodges.
Thank you very much. And having worked on this and, being a pharmacist, this is a gateway drug, folks. You say what you want. Marijuana is a gateway drug. The jails are not filled up with folks that are using marijuana. No matter what people say, that is not true. It is absolutely not true, and it's a gateway drug. Medical marijuana, we've looked at that. The Substance Abuse Service Council has looked at that, and we've actually said, and these are the professionals out there, DBHDS, all of the folks around the table said no to medical marijuana. The reason is, number one, you don't know what you're getting, because plant to plant it varies between CBD and the components in THC, and there are companies, there actually is a pharmaceutical company that actually has a number of these in the pipeline right now, that some are in phase 3 clinical trials that actually have the studies and can look at the proper dosing for the individual patient. And ultimately this is a federal issue because it's classified as a Schedule 1. And I will tell you what, they have moved forward with some things in some legislation, but as a pharmacist, I would not put my neck out on the line to open some of these businesses across the country to do this, because you are still in violation of federal law. The states actually do not have the ability to move forward with legalizing marijuana and the ability to say, hey, this medical marijuana is a good thing. We have a process with the FDA to approve medications to make sure they're safe and effective. So if a General Assembly, if a legislative body approves marijuana for medical use, we're bypassing the system. So what then would stop a drug manufacturer from going to a legislative body and say, you know what, this is good stuff. It works for me, it works for my mother. You need to approve this. There's no difference.
Thank you very much. So at this point, we get to have an exciting second coin toss. And this time I get to pick on Dr. Crowley. She has to call the toss. So Dr. Crowley, heads or tails?
Heads.
And I'm tails. I'm just tails. So that means that you get, you're going to have to go, you get to choose, I'm sorry, whether you want to go first for the closing statement or second. Okay. So Dr. Crowley will take your closing
Wait, I have to
statement.
go first again? Every time I've been with Mr. Hodges, I have to go first.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do my closing statement. I want to open by just commenting on a couple of things that Mr. Hodges has said. First, on the Medicaid cost overruns. The reason that the Medicaid program is costing more than originally envisioned is because there are many more people who have enrolled in it than it was originally envisioned, and therefore it is costing more. The federal government is covering that 100% for the first few years. The states have to pick up the cost after, I think it's 3 years, pick up 5%, then after several years it's 10%. Those are budget things that you can plan for, as I discussed. So it is because there is such a huge demand for it in these states. That's why we have that. Second of all, I just would like to point out that Mr. Hodges did talk about the multiple places where he gets his funding from for his campaign, and 96% of his funding comes from corporations and PACs, 41% of that from the healthcare industry. And then third, I want to point out that the gateway drug that people are mostly worried about are prescription opioids. Those are the things that are proven to take people down the road into heroin addiction. It's almost automatic. Marijuana is not taking people into heroin use. Okay. 2 weeks from tonight, we will be watching the results of this election. The whole nation and indeed the world will have their eyes on Virginia, and what Virginians decide in this election will be seen as a referendum on the 2016 election. Was that election an aberration? I hope Virginia will lead the nation towards civil discourse, honesty, good government, and an ethic of care and community. As you know, the central message of our campaign has been your voice for the common good. Last week, Michael Gerson, the Washington Post columnist and former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Can I ask a second? I thought we had 5 minutes for our closing statement.
I know that's what it does say in here, but I don't know if you guys were given different information in the organizational process. Yeah, just, all right, just continue your statement. We'll give you each 5 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you.
all righty, so where am I? I'm at 2 minutes? I'm at 2 minutes, so I have 3 more minutes. Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, we have a chance to change the direction of our state if Democrats hold the 3 statewide offices and elect more Democrats to the House of Delegates. I am one of 54 Democrats challenging Republican-held seats, and half of us are women. I want to be one of the people who goes to Richmond to shake up the status quo. We have been mired in gridlock for far too long. As you know, the central message of our campaign has been your voice for the common good. It is a concept that everyone has heard, but to which many people assign different meanings. I liken it to the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Last week, Michael Gerson, the Washington Post columnist and former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, wrote this: "The common good is a neglected topic in our politics. It is not identical to market forces or to the legal rules that maximize individual autonomy. It is the result of prudent public and private choices that strengthen community, which is the seedbed of human flourishing, and ensure that the weak are valued and protected." The weak are valued and protected. The idea of the common good emerges from religious sources, but it provides a broad political common ground. The common good is the central tenet that has driven my professional and personal life, and it is the value that will undergird every decision I will make as your delegate in Richmond. Early on in this campaign, a man asked me if I would vote with the party or with the people, and here is my answer. I pledge to read and understand every bill I am expected to vote on and vote based on my best judgment of what is in the best interest of the people of the 98th and all Virginians. I won't be voting based on a memo from the party leader. Years ago, a friend of mine, Penny Rhodes, served in the General Assembly. She's a Republican. And Penny told me that this is the practice that she had. She read every bill and she wouldn't vote till she read it. And she said nobody else ever did that. This is something I have never forgotten, and it is a model I pledge to follow. So for the first time in many years, the citizens of the 98th District have a real choice when you go to the polls, a choice between more of the same or for a new direction, and I hope you will choose someone who will work to assure affordable health care for all Virginians, raise wages to a livable level, make our schools state-of-the-art, protect the water that we drink and the air that we breathe, encourage participation in our democracy by protecting voting rights and ending partisan gerrymandering, get the real help that people need who are addicted to opioids, enact common sense gun laws, protect women's reproductive rights, and of course, protect and enforce all civil and human rights. I hope you will vote for me, Sheila Crowley, on November the 7th. Thank you very much.
Delegate Hodges, I hope you'll forgive the extended 5 minutes, but I figured that you would not have won election to the House of Delegates if you weren't good at filibustering.
That's not a problem. When you're in the House of Delegates, you need to, on the fly, you need to be able to adjust.
That's correct.
And which is no problem at all. Hopefully, I won't take the full 5 minutes. I'll be short. You've heard enough from us probably tonight, and are probably ready to get home. At the end of the day, folks, it's about leadership. It's number one when you cast your vote. I have a proven track record as a legislator in the General Assembly. And I will tell you, the issues that I'm working on are complex issues. Many folks said could not be solved, and we're moving forward with solutions for all of these. I have the willingness to tackle these solutions, and it's quite a few of them. You will not find a legislator in the General Assembly that is working on as many issues that are as important to their district as Keith Hodges. I am passionate about them, and they are moving forward, and I intend that for each and every one of these to move forward and to have a solution, many of which we already have. You know, it's proven. Leadership with economic development. Leadership with economic development that also protects the Chesapeake Bay and protects our way of life. Leadership in forming a regional economic development organization with 8 localities. How many of you realize how hard it is to get 8 localities that are to get along? And just in its infancy, just this year with those 8 localities, we have had 5 referrals from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership to the Middle Peninsula. Now that doesn't sound like much, but considering we've never had one in 20 years, that's a big deal, folks. That is a huge deal, so they're looking. That is the change that we need to bring those good paying jobs for our future. Leadership in moving forward with an internet model to bring fiber and wireless broadband across the Middle Peninsula. And this could actually solve the rural broadband problems in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You read about it in the Gazette Journal a couple of weeks ago. Well, you know, behind the scenes, Keith Hodges and Keith Hodges' leadership is helping to move that forward. Those initial meetings with the 6 people in those meetings was Keith Hodges pulling that meeting together. And every subsequent meeting after that. Leadership in looking at the opioid crisis and how we can move forward. Leadership in introducing the budget amendments in the General Assembly to deal with this crisis, for the CSPs, and for treatment. Leadership in protecting the Bay, and leadership in ensuring that we have drinking water and protecting the Potomac aquifer, but at the same time can have economic development. We have the final recommendations to the General Assembly from the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Advisory Commission. That's a mouthful. But even though that ends this year, I have a commitment from everyone around the table to continue moving forward with short-term and long-term solutions. You're not going to hear the political rhetoric from me, folks. It's not in my nature. It's in my nature to solve problems. It's what I like to do best. And we sit down at the table. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. I'm going to work with you to solve this problem. I have certain core principles and core values with lower taxes, less government, defend the Second Amendment, fiscally conservative. Those are my core values. But I'm also very passionate about this district and about the people here and our way of life. You're not going to hear that political rhetoric from me. And I will not run a negative campaign. I will defend myself when needed. But you will not hear that from me. There are a number of negative mailings that have already gone out. You've heard things tonight. But I will not do that. It's not in my nature. I move forward and I solve problems. You know, we need common sense. And I know we need common sense in the General Assembly. And that's what I bring to the table. And the political rhetoric that you hear, all that does is create divisiveness. And the last thing we need right now is the divisiveness and people apart from each other, not working together. We don't need the divisiveness at all. And that's what the negativity brings to the table. It's about statesmanship, not partisanship. And we need more statesmen as elected officials. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you guys so much. I really have to commend the audience. You guys were a terrific audience. Usually I have to do more scolding than that, so thank you so much for not making me bring out my mom. My 4-year-old will attest it can be very terrifying. And I also want to really extend gratitude to the